Welcome, everybody. My name is Scott Hirsch, and I'm the product marketing leader here at Blend. I'm really excited to be leading this presentation with you today with Peter Wanamaker, Principal Analyst at Forrester, on milestone-based lending when customer loyalty isn't everything. This is a really exciting piece of information that we really want to share with you today. This is all original research that we just completed over the last couple of weeks. There's a lot of information to cover, but as a short tease, I want everybody to know this is the first time that we've publicly presented this information. And we're going to be wrapping it up into a published research study that will be available in the coming weeks after the conference. And everybody who's attending the conference will get an email when the published research is ready for review. So first I want to introduce Peter. Peter has been at Forrester for more than a decade. He specializes in digital strategy at banks, advising them on how to better win, engage, and retain customers. He leads Forrester's digital banking benchmark research, and his strategic frameworks help banks prepare for digital disruption and the future of financial services. When we first set out to do this piece of research, I was really excited to be working with Peter because his research area so aligns with what we've been trying to do here at Blend to help banks better compete with milestone-based lending. So welcome, Peter. Really excited to have you here. So by way of agenda, I'm going to quickly take us through the research hypothesis just to establish for everybody what we set out to accomplish when we started doing this research. I'm going to hand it off to Peter. Peter's going to take us through an overview of all the findings, and that's going to culminate in a presentation of a milestone-based lending maturity model that we've developed together. And then finally, in the last 5 or 10 minutes, we'll have an open dialogue between Peter and me and share some interesting insights from the research. So the research hypothesis that we set out to prove, there were a couple of key assumptions that we had here at Blend that we reached out to Forrester because we wanted to test them. So assumption number one was that we suspected that consumer expectations were shifting and that consumers expected financial institutions not just to offer products that meet their needs, but to actually anticipate their needs. And this is part of a larger digital macro trend that's been going on for more than 2 decades. But it's finally making its way into financial services, and there are tons of financial startups that are taking advantage of this trend. At the same time, our second assumption was that our experience with large banks had taught us that there's a set of technical capabilities required to be able to anticipate consumer needs and position the right products for consumers at the right time with a minimal amount of friction. And we really wanted to understand how banks viewed their progress in terms of building out those technical capabilities in order to be able to innovate by offering these exciting new digital products. So we knew we wanted to do this research with Forrester to help unpack both of those macro consumer trends, as well as the internal technical enablers that would enable financial institutions to be able to take advantage of those trends. And that's why we set off to do this research with Forrester. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Peter right now, and he's going to take us through some of the findings.
Great. Thank you very much. Very happy to be here. Thank you to Blend. Yeah, I'm really excited to share this primary research, brand new, hot off the presses, as they say. I'm going to start by putting what we're going to talk about today and what we're going to dive into really soon into a bit of a wider context, which is pretty somewhat well understood, I imagine, by many of you in the audience, but is really foundational to understanding the key findings from this new research. So what I mean is there are factors at play outside of milestone-based lending that are sort of putting into sharp relief the need for better lending practices, better, and in many cases, better marketing around lending for financial institutions. So a couple of those, and I'm just going to highlight 3 broader trends. So number 1, consumers' use of digital technologies and digital touch points for financial services and for banking is really widespread. I mean, it's borderline ubiquitous in some areas. It's still growing in some other areas. But the issue is not that there's no adoption in of digital tools in financial services. As many of you can point to your own data, Forrester certainly has mountains of data on this. At the same time, most lending brands, most bank brands, most financial services brands are undifferentiated or lacking differentiation. We're going to give you one chart that shows that from some Forrester research in just a second. Number two, friction and app abandonment remain really common. That might even be an understatement in the lending paths to purchase. So app abandonment has always been a problem since the dawn of digital financial services. But it is, while it has gotten a bit better in the past decade plus, it has not gotten significantly better. And I'm going to share some data in just a minute about that. But that's, there's still major barriers to people completing the digital path to purchase in lending and in other areas of financial services. And finally, number three, our view, based on our broader research and frankly, strengthened and amplified by this research we just did with Blend that we're sharing with you today, is that banks and lenders cannot achieve sustained profitable growth without digital excellence. A lot of what we're going to talk about today is around strong digital offerings that lead to and really support milestone-based lending, and without what we call dynamism, right? So this gets into agile and speed to market and all the things that make some companies more nimble than others. And I'm going to define that later in just a few minutes in this presentation. But those two factors are both necessary for achieving sustained growth. So I said a moment ago, I'm going to share with you some proof that banks are under-differentiated or undifferentiated in their branding. This is just one, right? What you can see here, and this is from some recent research that Forrester did. This is in a partnership with another organization. But really quickly, what you can see is when it comes to esteem, that is consumer self-reported sense of trust in financial services companies, it's pretty good, right? A lot of firms certainly many are well above 25%. And quite a few are above 50. And this is only where we had sample size, right? So I can tell you from doing other research that all of the regional banks, many more lenders are in this sort of bottom middle area, right around where Citi is, Wells Fargo is on this map. What is very rare in financial services is a high level of differentiation, perceived differentiation on the part of consumers. For really a long time, that was not a major problem, right? Banks could be successful and grow without being highly differentiated, right? The where your branches were, what your rates were usually sufficient for enough or adequate differentiation. Some of that has ceased to be true. And more importantly, there's been more competition and a growing variety of competition such that bank brands are still trusted, as we said, but not differentiated today. And there's a problem because in our, again, broader research, what we found is that there is a dark potential future, one in which banking brands, lenders slip inadvertently into the background. They lose their relevance in people's everyday lives, such that they become what we sometimes call dumb money pipes, right? They still exist, but their ability to grow and to really achieve profitable growth over time, over multiple business cycles, is really put at risk, right? First comes relevance, and then comes their ability to really grow in the way they have, or some of them have, over the past 50, 100 years in some cases. So this is an illustration, just very quickly, what you're seeing here. This is not data, but it illustrates the problem we're seeing, which is if you look back, certainly 50, but even 20, 15 years ago, most financial services brands had a clear role in people's lives, in their customers' lives. They had a direct relationship, not all, right? There are exceptions to this, but many, certainly retail banking brands and most lenders, had a direct relationship with those customers. Increasingly, what we see is various disruptors. And yes, that includes fintech. It includes big firms like tech titans, Google, Amazon, certainly lots of the little fintech and disruptors, and some not previous competitors, right? Firms and brands in retail, Starbucks, telecommunication brands, getting in between lenders, bank brands, financial service brands, and their customers. And this ultimately leads to the problem of disintermediation, right? Which leads to then commoditization. And this view that all banks, all lenders are basically the same. And just to put a fine point on this, in Forrester's research, we've consistently found that more than 1 in 3 US bank customers already feel that all banks are basically the same. That's a major problem. Compounding this problem is something else I mentioned and sort of previewed a moment ago, which is that more than 3 in 4 online, or I should say digital, applications that are started for loans are not completed on that digital touch point, right? Now, some of this is direct problems with the process itself, right? The loan application. Some of it is around consumers' fear around security. But ultimately, it is a big problem, right? Under 25% of loan applications started on websites or apps are completed. That's a major problem. This app abandonment has been an issue, right? It is an evergreen issue, but it's one that lenders, it's also one, by the way, that has major implications, even adjusting this, even improving your application completion rate on websites or apps by 3 percentage points has a major impact on your business outcomes and frankly on your customers' experiences. There's another factor at play here though, right? So I've given you some numbers and some data, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention that when Forrester looks at what sets apart leading lenders, leading financial services companies, and frankly leading companies more broadly, the undercurrent, a foundational capability, is not really a capability at all. It's essentially a cultural approach to their business and to how they think about meeting their customers' needs, and that's dynamism. So here I'm defining dynamism as a combination of the speed and degree of change that a company can achieve. So it's important to note here, we're not trying to reinvent a term. We're not trying to replace agile, right? Or tell you that this is the new lean, or forget Scrum as a framework. This is really not a new framework. This is what is the underlying factor at play. What makes agile work? Ultimately, it is about enabling dynamism inside your organization. And I'll say here, we've highlighted some words here like the speed and degree of change, and that's for good reason. Ultimately, the most important word that we might want to highlight here is the word can, the second to last word. And that's because when we look at leading firms, it's not about, leading firms are not just the ones that are iterating wildly, right? And changing and pivoting dramatically every month. That is not actually very successful. That does not lead to sustained profitable growth. Instead, it is, do you have an approach that allows you to adjust as needed quickly and iterate rapidly? So what we're talking about here, the undercurrent of success, or a necessary component for success, is this dynamism. And this is going to come into play as we talk about the maturity model that we mentioned earlier in the introduction. We're going to talk about this. This is essential to multiple steps in the maturity model that we're going to outline for you. So this new study that we've done with Blend, so Blend and Forrester work together. This is a quick overview of the project and the demographics involved. We really looked at 2 audiences, right? Probably not surprising, but really important to understand. We looked at the practitioners in this space. So we looked at lenders and FIs. So we spoke to executives, surveyed them, got some quantitative as well as qualitative data from them. We also looked at the end users, the consumers, those folks that are taking out the loans, those folks that are using financial products and services. And we combine this to land on our to test our research hypothesis and to land on some key insights and findings that I am lucky enough to share with you right now. So without further ado, I want to tell you what we mean when we say milestone-based lending. It is an approach sometimes referred to as life event marketing. I might use those interchangeably during this call. There is some nuance in there, but generally speaking, there's a lot of overlap, of course. It's one in which lenders combine the context of a customer's financial milestones, life events, like a change in employment, relationship status, parenting status, etc., with the customer's financial profile and their financial needs to deliver a specific offer or call to action in real time or near real time. And most often today, it's near real time that's really sufficient to differentiate and to be successful. So what's the proof, right? Where's the data that we got from this new study? So what you're seeing here, this is the first time anyone's seeing this, and we're really excited to present to you. What we found is that consumers, which is maybe not surprising, but really important to understand and really can't be understated, is customers respond to milestone-based, contextual, context-driven value and relevancy in the offers that you make them, in the way in which you present the products, proactively offer the products, the loans, etc. So on the right-hand side, you can see here, we asked various statements such as, and then these are agree, disagree, Things like it's helpful to know how financial accounts can help me adjust to significant events and changes in my life, right? So people rarely, not never, but very rarely just decide to go get a loan or go get a checking account or any other financial product. It is almost always in service of something else. And most often, much of the time, that is almost all the time, much of the time I'll stick to stay data based. That is because of a milestone or an event in their life, a major event. We're going to talk about what exact events in just the next slide. We also asked about preference to work with a bank or a financial institution that understands and speaks to what I'm going through in my life currently, that context. And then last, we looked at willingness to explore a relationship with a different bank than what they're working with or different institution if they were more relevant, if their offers based in large part on life milestones were more closely aligned, more relevant to me and what I'm going through at this moment. So as I said, I want to show you what we're talking about here. What are the life events we're looking at? So I'm not going to walk you through every single one of these. You have this recording and you can come back and look at this at your leisure. But most importantly is milestones are consistently either the first or second most powerful driver for why a customer chooses to open a new financial product. This is really, to put a highlight over the insight here, the bigger lesson, to distill this down to one statement or one thesis, it is that life events, milestones drive financial product purchasing. They don't drive every aspect of brand choice. We're going to get into that in just a few minutes and talk about differentiation, but they are the major catalyst. They are the driver of financial product purchasing. So let's think about it from the practitioner side for a moment. First, there's good news in a sense. And you'll understand this plain analogy in just a moment, but FIs, executives at lenders and financial services companies and banks, they do understand that milestones matter, right? This is not a secret, right? I will show you in a few minutes that there's a major gap between knowing the reality and acting and being able to meet that reality, meet that opportunity, but they're aware of this and they are invested in building out the capabilities that will enable them to take advantage of this and just better serve customers. Right? When I say take advantage, I don't mean take advantage of the customers. I mean capitalize on the fact that milestones drive financial product purchasing. And just to put a little data behind this from our brand new study, we looked at things like which of the following are your primary business goals for the year. And certainly a high percentage, right, are understanding that improving customer experience, better understanding those customer needs is really important. And a lot of them, more than a third or roughly a third, depending on how you want to look at this. How important do you believe milestone-based marketing is to your organization's overall business success? I didn't do that verbatim, just for clarity. So a large share, right? Almost half say it is important to my organization's success. Right? So they understand that customer obsession matters. And to go a little bit further here, they're actually investing in milestone capabilities, milestone-based lending capabilities, right? So what we see is that a substantial increase, a third have seen a substantial increase this year. And then when you're looking into next year, right, obviously 2020 has been a turbulent year and continues to be, let's be honest, and various factors at play, including the pandemic and attempts to contain it are still at play, right, are still going to be at play, frankly, almost certainly through the end of this year. But when we look into the next year and a half, 18 months into and through 2022, what we see is that a majority are looking at increasing their investment in milestone-based offerings, milestone-based technologies, etc. Here's the problem, though. When we look at the actual ability to deliver on these promises, far too few. It's, we showed you the plane a few slides ago, right? Big, beautiful, substantial investment. The problem is the ultimate result, at least as of now, is really failing to deliver. So I'm gonna spell out exactly what we mean, what the gap is. We're going to give you sort of a quantified sense of the gap between understanding this opportunity and taking advantage, really meeting this need in just a second. But in order to do so, I want to break down the way we, Blend and Forrester, started to think about milestone-based lending, milestone-based marketing, as we looked through and as we sort of analyzed the data and the information that we were getting from these two studies, or from this one study, combination of consumers and practitioners. So we thought about it as really three pillars, right? And I'm going to talk you through each of them really quickly. So ultimately, milestone-based marketing, I should clarify, Effective milestone-based marketing programs, milestone-based lending programs are built on personalization, the ability to tailor products and services, the offers, the experiences to a customer. Ultimately, it is a bit aspirational, but ultimately at a one-to-one level. Second pillar is cross-product decisioning, right? This is not terminology you'll use with the end user, but this is internally what's making a difference, is the ability to instantly, in real time, deliver a qualified lending decision across multiple product lines and for the appropriate customers. And then the third pillar is product configuration and customer experience, right? The ability to appropriately promote self-service, reduce friction, what Forrester sometimes calls reducing barriers, reducing the cognitive load on the user, on the end user during that purchase journey. So all of these have an impact on brand choice, on financial product decisioning, but all of them also, by the way, have a decision on brand choice and on that app abandonment problem we talked about earlier in this presentation. So I'm going to show you the data we found that really highlights the problem, the gap between the big plane they want to build and the tiny toy plane that they currently have, that most FIs currently have. So we're going to go through these one by one. I'm going to go through each of the pillars. I'm not going to bore you by reading every single data point, but you can certainly take a look at this data while I'm talking you through this. So personalization, the first pillar that we're going to talk about. What we see is that while belief that the capability is important is sky high, right, at or above 80% or at 79% for one of them, across financial services providers, across lenders, the problem is their ability to optimize for this, whether or not they are optimized currently for this is really low, right? And you're going to see this through the next 3 slides. We're going to show you each pillar. In all cases, belief is really high, optimization very low, and the gap we're going to highlight for you on the right-hand side. So I'm going to highlight one of these really specifically. So I want to talk about, and it is, in this case, it happens to be the highest gap, and that's dynamic segmentation. So financial providers, lenders, banks, et cetera, have been pretty good for multiple decades at basic segmentation, right? And even somewhat advanced. What they're really falling short on today is the ability to use first, second, and third-party data to make constantly improving segmentation models and act on those models, right? So in this case, we're seeing a major gap here. Some of that is because of various factors we're going to talk about, right? These pillars are not mutually exclusive, right? So these all have interplay between each other. And a lot of the tech stack decisions that you're going to need to make, a lot of the process innovation that you're going to need to employ is going to affect multiple areas of multiple pillars and multiple areas within each pillar. When we talk about I'll talk about the next pillar quickly, cross-product decisioning. So as you can see, we looked at data integration, instant decisioning, integration management, the ability to integrate various product decisioning tools with back-end systems. So some of this is visible to the customer. Some of it is invisible, it's all back-end. And then this is really important in lending is credit and risk policy management. So here I want to quickly highlight data integration. Again, it happens to be I shouldn't say happens. It is the biggest gap, and I think that's accurate, right? This is based on the practitioner survey that we did. But I can tell you, I think in this case, those FIs, those executives at lenders are correct. This is a huge gap, right? It is nearly 60% gap. The ability to ingest relevant data, to limit the amount of data required from consumers, and then be able to deliver a decision, right? Financial institutions have been and continue to be pretty good at getting data and holding data. They are very bad tend to be very bad at utilizing data, managing data in such a way that it's not siloed, and then taking action on data, right? Or enabling a customer to take action on data. So that data integration, I mean, for my money, we're going to talk to the maturity model. And this is a highlight of our study. You all are the first people to see this. I think it's accurate. It may not be shocking, but it really cannot be understated how important the gap is between the importance of data integration and the lack of optimization within financial providers. And then I'm going to talk about the third pillar. So this is product configuration and customer experience. So we looked here at self-service conversion innovation. Is an area that many banks did a fair amount about 10 years ago, but have not done much since, have not moved the needle much. They've tried. Omni-channel customer experience, speed to market, and then conversion optimization. And you can see the definitions right in there. Here, I'm going to talk about one that isn't the biggest gap. It's actually the second lowest gap, although as you can see, all of these have a major gap, right? 82% believe that speed to market is really valuable, really important, and yet only a third, or a little more than a third, are actually optimized for this. Speed to market really, it gets right at that concept of dynamism that I talked about earlier, right? And many FIs are trying to implement agile processes, and that's to their credit. That said, most are still falling quite short, right? And agile is just one piece of this. The ability to quickly identify, build, assemble new loan products or application experiences using no code or low code configurators. Basically, that ability to plug and play and then, by the way, measure and iterate, right? Measure, improve, and iterate. That's really, it's an area where, while it is not the biggest gap here, it is, to me, worth highlighting. So what do we do about this, right? Because it's a little fun sometimes to do a brand new study, find lots of cool data that shows that FIs and lenders are missing this big opportunity for milestone-based lending. But in fact, we found more. We found ultimately and built a model for how to improve your milestone-based lending efforts, your milestone-based marketing efforts. So the solution is prioritizing your path to milestone excellence, right? And I'm going to get more specific. If I just showed you this slide, it's true, but it isn't nearly sufficient. So I want to get right into something that we built. So Forrester, in collaboration with Blend, built a maturity model, and I'm showing it to you here. So we built it in 3 steps, and they are, it is not that you can't do anything until you've completed each part of each step, but they are essentially sequential, right? This is a 3-step approach to maturity in milestone-based lending. So these are, in case you can't see, in case you don't recognize, these are built out of the component parts of our 3 pillars, right? So I'm going to walk you through them very quickly, just so you have a sense of the thinking behind this. The first step is around systems integration, right? It is integrating. So that involves data integration. I highlight that. That's not a mistake. That's a big gap. It is things like MarTech ecosystem integration, right? MarTech is a term that's been tossed around for a few years now. It is often still heavily siloed, broken. Well, it's rarely fundamentally broken, but it's the ability for the right hand to know what the left hand is doing is often really is non-existent within many lenders. Integration management, right? That's very fundamental. And then credit risk policy management, right? It doesn't have the word integration in it, but it's still about integrating different systems, different capabilities, in some cases, different data sources, and thinking about that. Then step 2 is about the front-end experience. What is visible to the end user, the consumer, and sometimes to the employees within the organization as well. So this is about instant decisioning, personalized product recommendations, optimizing conversion, omni-channel customer experience, right? Very easy to say and aspirational, but moving the needle towards this can make a big difference and is necessary for moving to step 3, as we'll talk about in a moment. And then self-service conversion innovation, right? So that ability for the customer to take self-service actions and do so conveniently. And then step 3 is really, and this one has the smallest number of parts to it, the smallest number of sub-steps, for lack of a better term. But it's in many ways the hardest, right? That's why it's step 3. So this involves speed to market, dynamic segmentation, and personalized omni-channel experience. So not just moving to consistent omni-channel customer experience, but personalized, tailored to each individual end user. So we recommend this. I hope this data has been helpful for you. I found it really interesting to do this study, to these 2 studies really in collaboration. With that, I want to hand it back over to Scott, and we're going to have a little bit of a conversation about what our findings were and what we do about this, how we help FIs do this better than they're doing it today.
Thank you so much, Peter. This has been a really exciting piece of research to be working on with you guys, and I've really appreciated the amount of collaboration and transparency we've had on this. So I wanted to ask you a couple questions. I actually got some new ideas and thoughts just seeing you present this one more time. But just right out of the gate, like just based on all the clients that you work with at Forrester, and thinking back maybe over the last year or so, how prepared are most financial institutions to truly differentiate with milestone-based marketing or milestone-based lending approaches?
So to differentiate, severely underprepared. There's a bit of good news sort of baked into that, right? Which it means that a lot of your competition, if you're an executive or a leader at a lender, at a financial institution, means a lot of your competition isn't doing it very well either. I think that's sort of, I hope that's some comfort, but sort of cold comfort. But yeah, I mean, to differentiate based on this. So as I said, it's understood, and you can go, I won't name names, but there are some firms that we work with that when we do a comprehensive website review, we identify some milestone-based lending capabilities or marketing efforts, right, in helping guide the person's decisions, helping them understand what product is appropriate for them or what loan is appropriate for them. They are almost always, actually, I guess I'll say always, either non-existent, right? That's the worst case scenario. Hidden, that's a very common one, right? Somewhere on the website or app, there's something built around life events, but it's basically impossible to find, or really clunky in their design. And then this gets into the last one, which is right when I started speaking, I talked about app abandonment. The back-end systems are not prepared to deal with milestone, right? So there might be some very good, I shouldn't say cute, but very clever marketing efforts around life milestones. But the backend systems aren't ready to actually help the customer or to use the data in a way that pulls from that context, uses context to drive better experience design, better product offering, better application experience I'm talking about. So I mean, in a word, or I guess 2 words, severely underprepared.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, while you were talking, I was actually thinking about an experience I had recently. I've been doing the shelter in place in Sonoma County, and I live in San Francisco. So I actually did a change of address form at the post office and got, the usual onslaught of offers that you get because you changed your address, and that's publicly available information. Obviously financial institutions were trying to market to me based on life events, but it was kind of like they were just dumb plays. They were just assuming that like I had either bought a new home or, had moved. And if the financial institution had a more well-rounded point of view on me or a 360-degree view of the customer, as you were highlighting in the importance of dynamic segmentation and personalization, those offers might have been much more compelling because they might have also been aligned to, my income level or maybe recent purchase histories I've made or other aspects like that. Which leads to my question. Do you think the problem is that most lenders treat milestone-based lending and milestone-based marketing as individual programs, similar to the change of address sort of program, rather than treating it as a broad capability that they need to leverage across their entire portfolio of products?
So in a word, yes. I mean, the answer is yes. I'll say 2 things, though, that expand on that. So one is it's not the only problem they have, right? As I said earlier, and there's some data integration. That is related to the problem of treating milestone-based lending as a program or as one campaign. It's a campaign by campaign basis. So you've nailed one of the problems. It's not the only problem. The other thing I'd say is I think it's indicative of a bigger problem, which is most FIs grew up in a way that leads them to be heavily siloed. Right? It's a term, and it's an overused term, but it's overused because it's true, is silos make a lot of things really difficult, a lot of innovation, a lot of improvement really difficult. This might be one of the areas, and I don't just mean milestone-based lending, although certainly this is, I think that's a highlight or a low light maybe of their lack of too many silos and too rigid silos. But I mean, they treat business lines so distinctly, sometimes for legal reasons, right? I mean, I'm not here to tisk every bank and say, I mean, sometimes there are various reasons around their charter and how they're chartered in different states, but that's not the major problem. The problem is that their org structures, their business strategy is really designed in a way that leads to treating milestone-based lending as a campaign, a single campaign, or maybe 2 or 3 campaigns a year. So yeah, I think it is. I think it's bigger than that. I think acknowledging that is important. I don't think though you can solve the problem just by realizing that. Knowing's half the battle. In this case, it might be 25% of the battle.
Yeah. Yeah, that really aligns to a lot of what we've been seeing with some of our customers, where there's emergence of new horizontal roles that are responsible for overseeing customer acquisition across all the product lines in an attempt to start to break down those silos.
Yeah,
Which
and
leads me
sorry, just
to
I,
yeah,
sorry, I was gonna say quickly. I do think we're seeing a shift here. It's a really good thing, and it's not at all. I don't, I'd say a third of FIs we work with are genuinely striving for that change, and are, we showed this in the work that you and I just did, right? I mean, in this study that we're presenting here, we saw that aspiration and we saw some actual investment, but it's still a problem as of today.
yeah. Um, this is kind of a tricky question, but since step one of the maturity model is systems integration, clearly technology is the key to unlocking this puzzle. And as usual, technology is also the one of the biggest impediments. It's like leveraging the technology appropriately. But based on the maturity model, I'm assuming that there are some people who are listening to this presentation right now who are like, yes, I'm totally on board. I totally agree with what Peter's saying. We need to start instituting these changes at our institution right now. What questions should they be asking of the tech leaders at their institutions to get them to start thinking about how to make progress towards creating some of this infrastructure change that would be required for milestone-based lending?
It's a tricky question. It varies. It does genuinely vary a fair amount. I mean, a lot of what I presented today there was a fair amount of consistency, often negative consistency or not so great consistency, but there was a fair amount of consistency. This one varies enough because the org structures are, while I said that all of them have problems around silos and product lines being, the rigid barriers between them, often in the data integration is a classic example of that.
Yeah.
Their org structures vary enough, and there's a fair amount of sort of soft cultural stuff, right? Who's feels friendly with who, right? So it varies a lot. That said, I'm going to try to answer your question as best I can. I think they should ask big questions, some broad questions, high level, not big, that's not quite the right word, high level questions of their technology partners, and some very specific ones. So at a high level, I think it is around, so something like, what is our API management strategy, right? Something like, what is our data strategy, right? Forrester and many others have written about it. I mean, there shouldn't be, data strategy is complex, and there kind of shouldn't be a one sentence answer to it, or if it is, it's probably just a platitude. But I think asking those questions and really listening too, by the way, the business leaders that you and I often work with, that are working with technology folks, part of their job is to listen, right? Not just to ask the questions so they can check the box and say, now we have to do what Blend and Forrester said. But really listening is understanding what the state of their data strategy is. Asking about the bigger impediments to data integration, right? Technology, I think technology folks sometimes get there's a stereotype about being sort of grouchy and sort of naysayers. But if you are open to listening, I mean, they'll help you understand what those big barriers are around. So it might be around API management, might be around the lack of data governance or outdated data governance models. Then to get into some specific questions. So I don't want to use the word technology audit because I think that's as scary as, well, it's not quite as scary as RFP maybe, but I do think working with technology leaders to map the current technology you have, to map where different data is, where, what MarTech is a good example of this, right? So there's almost always MarTech being used by various folks in the organization. What happens when you try to bring those folks together and map what lives where and who owns it? Don't yet get into, we're not trying to steal it from you. We're not trying to take ownership, although, and that's going to be eventually a part of not stealing, but collaborating. But I think that is a big piece of it. And then there's some great exercises, right? Like when it comes to, again, data and use of context, we've done some work with Forrester where we've done some work with some FIs and lenders where we do day-long workshops where we're working with multiple folks inside, right? It's very cross-functional inside an organization. And basically it's a 2-sticker question, right? It's, if we knew this piece of data, if we could get this piece of data, what could we do? And that might be to help our own business outcomes. It might be to help our decisioning choices or our credit risk modeling, or it might be, how can we help the customer, right? Improve the customer experience, improve their offerings, improve the product recommendations. So exercises like that can help.
Yeah. That's great. That aligns a lot with some of the conversations we've been having at some of our larger financial customers. I guess last question. We got about a minute to wrap this up. So, the environment has changed a lot, even in the last 6 to 9 months. What with COVID and we were already on a trend towards digital becoming a more important channel for a lot of financial institutions, as well as digital self-service experiences. Do you feel like the imperative to be doing things like milestone-based marketing has become even more important in the last 6 to 9 months?
So yes, I think so. I think that there are two seemingly there are two forces at play, and they seem to be at odds with each other. I'm not sure they actually are, or will end up being. But so there are some urgent needs that FIs and lenders have sometimes that might beat out in priority milestone-based lending in the near term, right? So if PPP loan processing is just a quick example of you had to stand that. I mean, we're literally standing up, hopefully not entirely new processes, but having to recalibrate a lot of stuff, and in some cases stand up whole new processes, new systems, et cetera. So there have, I think let me put it this way. In the last 6 months, I think that a lot of folks inside, a lot of practitioners at lenders, at FIs have had to, and I think it's actually understandable and shouldn't be tissed or looked down upon, have had to put other things aside for a second and zero in on some major problem. I put the fire out kind of thing. That said, I think, it's astounding to me, maybe not surprising, but still astounding, the shift we've seen in digital adoption, usage across multiple markets, not just in cities that were locked down, but across banks and FIs, geographies, across the entire country, the U.S. I'm talking about. And so ultimately, I think it does. I think it does two things, and that it's good. We're going to start to see this in the next 6 months, the next 9 months. Is we're going to see it move the horizon line up. So COVID, as well as all the efforts, those urgent needs have moved the horizon line up, and I think it's amplified the need to. I said this earlier, but if you can change the app abandonment rate, if you can decrease the app abandonment rate by 2 percentage points, certainly if you can do it by 6 or 7 percentage points, you see a clear impact on your business outcomes, on your business results. So yeah, I think ultimately, and I don't mean in 5 years, I mean in the next year and a half, the imperative has grown for milestone-based lending. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Great answer. And when you were speaking, I was reminded of something that you said at the beginning of your presentation about the importance of dynamism. And that's another thing that we've learned in the last 6 to 9 months. And PPP is a great example. A lot of institutions, needed to get that set up really, really quickly. And so the importance of dynamism as a part of this whole technology stack problem, dynamism and milestone-based marketing are both, two things two benefits that you get from sort of overhauling your technical capabilities. So
absolutely. And I'll say, to piggyback on that, I mean, I said it when I was talking earlier, and I sort of said this off the cuff, but that word "can" is the most important word. And this is proof of it, right? Because no one knew, I hope no one knew COVID was coming, right? And so that ability to pivot rapidly and to just, I mean, there were firms that were caught flat-footed. And it wasn't because like some other things like, open banking or initiatives like that, they knew it was coming. This was a sudden change that you had to have the systems in place. I don't mean the technology systems. I mean those dynamic capabilities in place so you could adjust as needed.
Yeah. Yeah. We're getting the hook, Peter. We got to move on to our next session right now, but this has been a really fascinating conversation. I really appreciated you spending time with us today and doing this work with us. A reminder to everybody who's watching right now, the study that we've been referencing this presentation will be published as a written report, and everybody who's attending the conference today will get an email with information about how to download that when it's available. So once again, Peter, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This is fun.
Yeah. Thank you.